The year is 1789. The French Revolution unfolds. The stage is set in 1789 as France teeters on the brink of chaos. The Great French Revolution, fueled by food shortages and an economic depression, sparks an uprising. The people, fed up with royal rule, rise against King Louis XVI, sending him and over 11,000 of his loyal supporters to the guillotine. Not long after, the wrath of the revolutionaries turns toward the last Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. By 1793, amidst the turmoil, a young and ambitious artillery officer, Napoleon Bonaparte, emerges. As the Queen meets her end in the central square, the crowd erupts in cheers, celebrating the fall of the monarchy. Yet, in the midst of the jubilation, Napoleon remains stoic, reflecting on the fate of those who succumb to the tides of revolution. Soon, Napoleon's destiny takes a dramatic turn. Commissioner Paul Barras urgently informs him of a dire situation. The British fleet has seized the strategic port city of Toulon. If France doesn't act swiftly, the nation could fall to England. Desperate, Barras pleads for Napoleon's expertise to devise a plan that could save the Republic. Napoleon, ever the strategist, sees the value of the enemy's heavily fortified positions. He proposes a bold plan to capture the British stronghold. The French army mobilizes, preparing for a bloody confrontation. Meanwhile, Napoleon arrives in Toulon, analyzing every move of the British forces with a sharp eye. As his subordinates work tirelessly, melting down old weapons to craft explosives and cannon shells, Napoleon watches and waits. The nights are lively on the British side as soldiers revel in drunken festivities, unaware that their celebration may soon be their downfall. The assault on the fortress begins. Napoleon, ever the fearless strategist, orchestrates a daring attack. Explosions erupt, creating chaos as French soldiers scale the fortress walls using ladders. Napoleon himself leads the charge, unshaken even when his horse is struck by enemy fire. Undeterred, he pushes forward, climbing to the top and rallying his troops to overpower the defenders. With the high ground secured, the French turn the British cannons against their own fleet, bombarding and burning ships in the harbor. By morning, the operation is a resounding success, earning Napoleon a promotion to brigadier general. Meanwhile, the political landscape shifts dramatically. On July 27, 1794, the Reign of Terror comes to an end. Robespierre, unable to silence all dissent, is overthrown. His desperate attempt to escape fails, and he is sentenced to the guillotine. With his death, over 41,500 prisoners gain their long-awaited freedom. Amid these turbulent times, a personal chapter unfolds for Napoleon. At the victim's ball, he is captivated by a charming woman. The next day, a young boy visits him, requesting the return of his late father's weapons. Upon fulfilling the boy's request, Napoleon discovers that the boy's mother is none other than Josephine, the woman from the ball. Their connection deepens and romance blossoms. But the peace is short-lived. On October 5, 1795, royalists stage an uprising, seeking to restore a monarchy. Vastly outnumbering government forces, the rebels aim to seize Paris. Yet standing in their way is Napoleon. With ruthless efficiency, he deploys artillery loaded with shrapnel shells. A single volley decimates the advancing rebels, leaving the survivors in terror and retreat. This triumph cements Napoleon's reputation as a man of decisive action, both on the battlefield and in shaping the future of France. Fresh off his battlefield successes, Napoleon weds Josephine, hoping their union will soon bring an heir. However, their marriage proves tumultuous, and the dream of a child remains unfulfilled. By July 1798, Napoleon embarks on a bold campaign to Egypt after conquering Italy with barely a fight. His mission, to liberate territories and transform Egypt into a French colony. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Napoleon's forces achieve a resounding victory at the Battle of the Pyramids, solidifying his legend. While in Egypt, Napoleon is captivated by the region's rich culture, marveling at the treasures of ancient tombs and pharaohs' coffins. Yet his fascination with Egypt is disrupted by troubling news from home. Rumors swirl that Josephine has taken a lover, the young and dashing Charles, 10 years her junior. Initially skeptical, Napoleon's suspicions deepen. Determined to confront the truth, he cuts his campaign short and returns to France. Arriving at his estate, he finds his worst fears confirmed. Josephine is absent, and the rumors are undeniable. When Josephine finally arrives, she is met with a harsh reality. Her belongings packed into suitcases, sitting in the courtyard. Furious and heartbroken, Napoleon refuses to see her, severing ties with the woman he once adored. Despite Josephine's betrayal, Napoleon finds himself unable to let her go. His love for her outweighs his anger, and he forgives her, choosing reconciliation over separation. Meanwhile, political turmoil awaits. Summoned by the leaders of the Directory, Napoleon faces accusations of desertion for leaving Egypt prematurely. The general, unapologetic, shifts the blame onto the government, accusing them of plunging France into bankruptcy during his absence. Soon after, a mysterious visitor, Mr. C, arrives at Napoleon's home with a daring proposition: overthrow the faltering government and take control of France as part of a provisional college of 3 consuls. Seeing an opportunity, Napoleon agrees and mobilizes the troops. The coup unfolds swiftly. Corrupt officials are arrested. Some surrender without resistance, while others fight back, only to meet the same fate. The rebels are herded into a hall, where Napoleon demands amendments to the constitution that would install him and 2 other leaders as consuls. When the deputies refuse, Napoleon's brother, Lucien, intervenes, raising the guard and forcing their compliance at rifle point. Under duress, the amendments are passed and Napoleon ascends to power. With Josephine by his side, the couple becomes a symbol of prestige and charm, adored by the people. They revel in their newfound luxury, attending grand parties and settling into a lavish new castle. Yet beneath the surface, challenges loom. France's foreign policy falters as the nation, nearly bankrupt, struggles to command respect on the international stage. Austria and England forge an alliance, threatening to annihilate France in mere hours. Desperate, the French foreign minister proposes an alliance with Austria, but the offer is flatly rejected, leaving the country on the brink of disaster. As tension mounts, Napoleon's resilience and strategic brilliance will once again be tested in the face of insurmountable odds. As tensions rise across Europe, the French government turns to Napoleon once again, urging him to take the throne and lead the nation to victory. On December 20, 1804, the momentous day arrives. In a grand ceremony, the Pope crowns Napoleon as Emperor of the French. But even at the height of power, personal matters weigh heavily on Napoleon. His desire for an heir grows, but Josephine remains unable to conceive. Frustrated and desperate, he issues an ultimatum: produce a child or face divorce. With no resolution in sight, Napoleon channels his energy into war. By 1805, the storm of conflict looms as the Russian and Austrian emperors convene to plot their attack on France. Confident of their superiority, they position their combined forces at Austerlitz, certain of victory and eager to divide new territories. Napoleon, however, is always one step ahead. Learning of the enemy's movements, he devises a masterful strategy to lure them into a deadly trap. At dawn, the Austrian and Russian armies march on what they believe to be a vulnerable French camp. As their infantry advances, Napoleon orders his forces to feign weakness, drawing the enemy closer. When the Allied troops engage, they find themselves ensnared. Napoleon, hidden in the nearby woods with the bulk of his army, springs into action. The French soldiers launch a devastating counterattack, encircling the enemy forces and forcing them into retreat. Many attempt to flee across the frozen lake, but Napoleon has anticipated this. With precision, he commands his camouflaged artillery to fire. Cannonballs tear through the ice, plunging thousands of enemy soldiers into the freezing waters below. The stunning victory leaves Europe in awe, solidifying Napoleon's reputation as a military genius and an unshakable force on the battlefield. Following his victory at Austerlitz, Napoleon meets with the Austrian emperor, diplomatically sparing his adversaries from total annihilation. But behind the scenes, personal strife clouds the emperor's life. In 1807, under pressure from his mother to test Josephine's infertility, Napoleon reluctantly spends a night with a young woman. When she becomes pregnant, his worst fears are confirmed. Still deeply in love with Josephine, he hatches a plan to pass the child off as their own, but his minister refuses to comply. 3 years later, their marriage dissolves. Josephine resists publicly acknowledging their separation, leading to a heated confrontation. Despite the fallout, Napoleon vows to remain her loyal friend, sending her to a countryside estate and promising to stay in touch. Seeking new alliances, Napoleon turns to the Russian Empire, proposing a union with Alexander I. However, the Russian ruler rejects the idea, citing the youth of Napoleon's sister. Undeterred, Napoleon secures an alliance with Austria instead, marrying Marie-Louise, the daughter of Emperor Francis II. Their union produces a son, an heir Napoleon joyfully shares with Josephine, his enduring confidant. The French army embarks on a grueling campaign, but they face relentless guerrilla-style attacks from Russian Cossacks. Each skirmish saps their strength, drawing them deeper into a hostile and unforgiving landscape. On September 7th, the brutal Battle of Borodino unfolds, claiming 28,000 French lives. Napoleon clings to his victories, penning letters to Josephine to share his triumphs, even as his forces diminish. Eventually, the French troops reach Moscow, only to find the once thriving city of 300,000 residents abandoned and destroyed. It's a hollow victory for the emperor, a reminder that conquest comes at a steep cost. As the French army occupies Moscow, Napoleon is stunned to find the city ablaze, set afire by retreating Russian forces. This scorched earth tactic denies him resources and signals the Russians' willingness to sacrifice their own capital. Napoleon contemplates advancing to St. Petersburg, but realizes that winter poses a greater threat than any enemy army. The brutal Russian winter devastates the French troops. Ill-prepared for the icy temperatures and starving due to disrupted supply lines, the once mighty Grande Armée dwindles from 600,000 to a mere 40,000 survivors during the harrowing retreat. By May 1814, Napoleon's string of defeats forces him to abdicate. The Allies exile him to the island of Elba, granting him control over the tiny domain and a promise of financial security. For nearly a year, the former emperor remains isolated, reflecting on his downfall. News of Josephine's re-entry into high society and her meetings with Russian Emperor Alexander I stirs deep emotions in Napoleon. Consumed by anger and longing, he escapes Elba and returns to France, defying the monarchy. The French king, fearing Napoleon's resurgence, dispatches troops to intercept him. Napoleon confronts the soldiers with a bold speech, imploring them to remember their loyalty to him. Moved by their former leader's words, the troops salute him, turning their backs on the king. Tragically, before Napoleon reaches Paris, Josephine succumbs to illness. Her death is a devastating blow to the emperor, who carries her memory even as he prepares for battle. Meanwhile, the Allies unite against Napoleon once more. England, Prussia, and a significant faction of French royalist forces amass an overwhelming army. Though outnumbered and betrayed by his own countrymen, Napoleon is determined to reclaim his empire. Napoleon plans a bold strike to crush British forces led by the Duke of Wellington. His army marches toward Waterloo, but heavy rains force him to delay the attack. Believing the soggy ground unsuitable for battle, Napoleon waits for better conditions, unaware that time is slipping away. As dawn breaks, news arrives that Field Marshal Blücher's Prussian army is dangerously close. Realizing the urgency, Napoleon orders his troops into action. Despite their best efforts, the British forces mount a steadfast defense, successfully repelling repeated assaults. Ever the fearless leader, Napoleon personally leads his men into battle. However, the tide turns as the Prussian forces arrive on the battlefield, overwhelming the French army. Chaos ensues, and defeat becomes inevitable. A sniper's bullet strikes Napoleon's hat but spares his life. Forced to retreat, he acknowledges his fate and gallantly congratulates Wellington on his victory. Their paths cross once more aboard an English ship, where Napoleon faces his captors with dignity. Though some demand his execution, Napoleon is exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. Stripped of his empire and power, he spends 6 long years in isolation, recounting his exploits and shaping his own legacy. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon breathes his last, haunted by the echoes of his beloved Josephine's voice. His extraordinary life, marked by triumph, ambition, and downfall, comes to an end, leaving an indelible mark on history.